Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I decided I would go through some old projects. This was inspired by the fact that for some reason for the past few weeks I've just been watching people going back to like old stories, reading their old diaries, and I thought it'd be pretty fun to do something like that myself. So I managed to find a very old email account that I used to use full of some old stories that were never finished, and I checked the word count. The longest word count for those stories from this time era was 4,000 words, so. But then there's also a story that's like 20,000 words that I never finished, and that was written a little bit later, but it's still classified as an old story because I consider it to have been written a while ago. 2019 it was written, almost 2 years ago as of filming this video. Over there on my laptop, you can't tell, but I've got all the documents pulled up. I also have my folder because I printed them out, the documents, and I also have a gem that was written the earliest of them all, and this one was written in 2017, so roughly when I was like 13 years old this was written. In fact, I had a couple of notebooks that I wanted to use as a story book. Like this has just one story inside, so I had a couple like that, but one of them I remember I ripped all the pages out and threw in the bin, so I can't really tell you. And every other notebook is just, it's been missing for years, so this is the oldest book I can get my hands on. I'm pretty sure this story was written at the end of 2017, so I was 13 when I wrote this, just because I remember sitting at my parents' old laptop and writing this and being really excited for it, and I remember planning it out and all of that. I transferred it onto Google Docs in 2018 because that was when I first learned that Google Docs was a thing. So we start with a prologue set in 2008, and I know that the main character was supposed to be 8 years old in this, and then we time skipped to them being like 17, I'm pretty sure. I'm jumping 9 years. So yeah, this was written in 2017. I remember daydreaming about this prologue and how these events should take place. In fact, this whole story was inspired by a daydream, which is kind of weird, but we're here for it. I rewrote this specific first line so many times and I was just not happy first time round. In my folder, here is the story. It's double-sided, so it's only like 5 pages, but this is it. I think I'll just read you the first paragraph so you can get a feel for what the story is. And also, the lack of formatting is just atrocious. And also, this was a time where I didn't know about like indenting. I literally just press tab and hope for the best. And you can tell. The first line of the prologue. Carly and Isaac Carter, I used to have such basic names, hesitantly stepped out of the dark blue Chevrolet Beat. This was also the time where I was too specific with things that don't matter, like this car that we never see again. I don't know why. Carly could feel tears stinging the brim of her dark brown eyes and an overwhelming ache of regret and sadness filling the inside of her stomach. She didn't like what she had to do. However, she was currently left without a choice. There was no room for any further arguments. So the story starts off as if these are the main characters, but spoiler alert, they're not mentioned until like the midpoint, or at least from what I remember, they're not mentioned until the midpoint. I just found a line that I thought I should say. Clutching onto his Spider-Man suitcase cautiously, he followed his parents into the large, odd building. I have so much critique just for this one sentence. Also, in this prologue, Carly and Isaac, they're this little child's parents and they're giving him up for adoption because they can't handle having a child anymore. It's too expensive and they hardly pay the bills and they want him to have a better life. But then this adoption process is sort of like leaving stuff at a donation place. Like, they're just kind of like taking their kid with their stuff and they're just dropping him off and they're like, bye. Literally, this prologue where it's supposed to be this whole emotional thing of these characters giving their child up for adoption is this. I am such an underwriter, but this is just... Then we jump to chapter 1, which is present day. And what I don't understand is why I wrote present day as if that would make sense. Because if this book was written in 2017, present day for me would be 2021, wouldn't it? But then the characters' ages wouldn't match up. Maybe I'm just looking too much into it, but think about it, like, if you're supposed to know how old this character is, then wouldn't it just be better to give the year? And then I remember writing this boy's mother, like describing her as, if you've ever read The Witches by Roald Dahl, she was heavily inspired by that. But this was when I was like 13, so this was my peak Roald Dahl experience. I used to read all his books and The Witches was one of my favourite. So, like, if you've read it, listen to this description and tell me if this reminds you of this. Then he heard the familiar voice of his now mother, Angela. She was a tall blonde woman with a slender complexion and long talons that she often used to hold a cigarette with or a glass of brandy. I don't establish any character goals. No character has anything they want to work towards apart from the parents that we see once. They have the only motivation, but even then you need to like squint to understand what their motivation is. And basically it's like this boy, he was put up for adoption by his parents and then he was adopted by this mean woman. But I never explain why she did it. Why did she adopt this child if she doesn't even like him? And she doesn't like children at all. So I never understood why. And she's supposed to be like a very shady woman. And then I'm thinking, don't you need to go through a lot of like background checks during adoptions? And yet this woman managed to get this kid. Chapter 2 is that big. I didn't even finish the sentence I was on. It just started. I can read it, but it's not done. Turning back around to observe his tiny room, comma. So this next story that I tried writing was actually written in 2019. This was before my 15th birthday. And therefore I was 14 years old when I wrote this. At the time of writing this, I was aware of the fact that my word choice wasn't the best. I didn't really know many sophisticated words. I didn't really know much about the vocabulary I should be using. So I decided I'd do the worst thing you can do in a situation like that, and it is Google the synonym for literally every word. With this one, I got it pulled up right here. One thing I know just by quickly scanning over this first page is that the pacing is terrible. 1 minute the character is running away from these people that really don't like him, which is never explained either. Second, he's meeting this other character at a completely different location, and I just don't understand why I couldn't have spent more time explaining things. Just like I did before, I will read the first paragraph of this chapter. There's 3 chapters of this, but they're all like pretty short. I mean, it's almost 2,000 words long and it's 3 chapters long, so you can kind of guess it's a short story. Axel ran as fast as he could, the wind of the cold night's breeze whipping him on the face as he did so. The streetlights were dimmed as nobody thought of replacing the energy, but that only helped him. Darkness was his best friend at the moment. I remember being so proud of this opening line, and now I'm just looking at it like it's the most basic thing on the planet. And then Axel decides to break into the house of this girl called Paisley because her window was open and he wanted to get away from these people. A plot thread never explained. And essentially, he breaks into this room, so Paisley, rightfully so, feels like scared, and so she picks up a baseball bat and she's like holding it to protect herself, and then Axel responds with, "Chill out, doll, there's no need to get violent," Axel told her as he threw his hands up in a steadying manner, realizing the fact she was advancing towards him. I never understood it. So once again, I have so much critique I can have for this. This is incomplete, so I can't critique it as a whole, and I don't think I came up with a plan for what to do after this. I thought I was just sort of pantsing it. This sets up so many questions and none of them are answered. And there was only supposed to be like 5 chapters, and so with 3 chapters we're more than halfway in, and I just keep adding on questions like, why does this happen? Why does that happen? Who's this? Why are they important? And none of it's ever answered. I just sort of expect the reader to know, which... Another story that I have, the last one that I found on this email. This one doesn't have a name, but I do remember it's dystopian. So this story was written in 2018, and I actually remember writing it in 2018, so I know for a fact it is written during that time. We have a prologue starting with a date and a year. This first line is just the worst, but I can say that there's something in this that I took and I'm using in my current dystopian trilogy because, as I mentioned, this is dystopian. So good to know that even when I was like 13 years old, I really wanted to write dystopian. Isabel, because her parents died in the prologue, it was really like, this whole chapter had terrible pacing. In the first chapter, she's alone and she's scavenging, and it just suddenly she managed to find an immaculate first aid kit just briefly under ash. Bingo! Isabel muttered to herself as she spotted a first aid kit. It may have been covered in dust and ash, but it was the best she was going to get. It's the best anyone would be able to ever get. It's just the box was covered in dust and ash. You can just dust it off, open the box, and you've got all the stuff there. This is just a mess. Next is a story that actually has a name, and it is Remind Me to Forget. It has like 20,000 words and I'd say 19 completed chapters. One thing I do say about it is I like the premise and I like the potential arcs my characters could have if I decide to explore it. And so I remember talking about potentially going back to this idea, reading it and re-outlining it, reworking it. It was that sad story I was talking about. To be fair, this does actually have quite a lot of stuff written.
There was a time where Avery was happy, where she still enjoyed the simplicity of life and the tranquility of her town. Ice skating being the area where her best attributes were put on display, and her interest in horror movies somehow perplexed her parents' older brother.
So I think that's all I'm going to say about the story, just because I did write it in 2019. And the final story, the one I've been looking forward to flashing back with the most, is this one. Now, this one is the oldest one here. It is completely destroyed. And the story I actually wrote on the front is called Luna, because that's the main character's name. And the back is just the most funniest thing ever. It's definitely not your ordinary princess or ordinary magic mentor. She talks about wanting to do archery because there was supposed to be a plot point of her liking archery, because at the time I was obsessed with archery. And this whole thing is handwritten, I think you can already tell, and my handwriting used to be terrible. It is absolutely terrible, and the tape smudging the ink doesn't make it better. And then I remember I used to want to draw like snowflakes as page breaks, and they don't even look anything remotely like snowflakes. One of the plot points here is that there's something called a white aura, and when I was writing this, I had no idea what it was. I was just sort of building this up to be this big thing that everyone was worried about, and I never explained why. These characters didn't know, and I didn't know. I never explained the magic system, I never explained anything about this. You're just sort of expected to know. So that's it from me for now. It was really fun going back and looking at all my projects, even though it did bring me emotional distress having to see how terrible my writing used to be. Let me know, have you ever gone back to look at your old project, and if you did, what was your reaction to it? Were you impressed by how well you could write when you were that age, or were you absolutely appalled like me? Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully I'll have a new video out Saturday, but things are getting a little bit hectic here, so I don't know, I'll do my best. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!